This is the Harbor Management Commission Rules and Procedures Update Committee meeting, Wednesday, November 4th, 2020 at 10 a.m. This is Jack Hirschler, Commissioner. Can I take a roll of today's meeting? Kim Taylor?
Here.
Harbor Master Ed Billings?
Here.
Jeff Stedman?
Here.
Sam Cargill? Harry French? Okay. The purpose of today's meeting is to review three items. We are going to open up the line to hear comments from the public at various points in today's meeting. So folks should be aware of that. If you do wish to make comments as members of the public, please identify yourself by name and provide your address. So on our agenda today, there are three topics. The first topic is to discuss a temporary permit rule, which would be a new rule for our rules and procedures for moorings in Southport Harbor. The second item would be a discussion about whether any new temporary permit rule would require any updates to other rules to ensure that our rules are clear and consistent. And then thirdly, we'd like to, if time allows, look at establishing a timeline for recommendation to the full Harbor Management Commission. This will be a timeline for the implementation of the updated rules and procedures in time for the 2021 boating season. So with that, let's begin. Chairman Taylor, you have created and distributed for everyone a draft to get us started thinking about a temporary mooring permit rule. Let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jack. Well, the draft that I distributed was intended as a discussion to get us going, not intended to be the rule that we ultimately decide on. However, I think when I was drafting it, I was thinking of the Yacht Club's request for to be able to use their 51 moorings to best and most efficiently provide moorings for their membership. I was thinking of the memorandum of agreement, which allows the Yacht Club to use their moorings differently than the moorings are in the rest of the harbor. And I was thinking of the memorandum of agreement, which requires them to follow or comply, if you will, with our local rules. So that I think what we've kind of all said was essential to think about is that the Yacht Club needs the 51 moorings. We are willing to give them flexibility in how they use the 51 moorings, but we've heard from the harbor master that the data that's required under the rules and procedures and in the harbor management plan is essential for running the harbor according to the plan. So I tried to combine all of those elements into my draft.
Kim, well, this is Jeff. I'm sorry I can't raise my hand. And could I?
Please.
If we're having a discussion before discussing the draft, I thought it was a detailed review. I had those three questions having to do with just the mechanics of implementing the temporary mooring policy. But basic to that, my other concern was did we decide after the last meeting that this is the policy that we're going to pursue with regard to temporary mooring permits, and might there be another approach to accomplishing this, sort of the same thing? But and that was my main thing, my main question. did we decide that the temporary mooring permit policy is what we want to proceed when there might be an alternative way of just saying that we'll set aside the North Anchorage because of the state and federal permits and the MOA, and that the moorings will be dealt differently in the anchorage, and that the harbor master would simply issue 51 permits to the yacht club to do with as they wish in terms of assignments, with the requirement that the yacht club provide timely information on all the boats to the harbor master. So I didn't know that we had decided whether there was. I just think there should be a discussion about that alternative or that approach to dealing with this, as well as the temporary mooring assignments.
Well, I think you're right. I don't think the commission as a group decided that we wanted that the procedure that I outlined in that draft is they didn't vote on it. So, I don't know how others feel, but I think that certainly it doesn't hurt to have a discussion and be sure that we've covered all the bases and considered all the possibilities. I think at the end of the day, though, I think what we're talking about is the same thing, and that is that the yacht club is different, and that there is a requirement that the harbor master has the data that's required by the rules.
Yeah, I just bring it up for discussion. I just think that at the last meeting, I thought we discussed these different options, and then I thought it's certainly, in my opinion, important to discuss these options before agreeing on the language of a particular approach.
I don't disagree with you. I think I think it's important that we make sure that we have considered everything and thoroughly, so that we are not left wanting on the other end of it.
And then the other thought is, should the yacht club be involved in this discussion because of the memorandum and because of to the extent that we're talking about the yacht club's anchorage, should they be be part of this discussion? And in that regard, have more of standing than the general public does, because we're specifically affecting or dealing with the North Anchorage, and therefore the memorandum and the plan and the state and federal permits.
Right. Although, Jeff, under our existing Rule 2B, which has been in effect for 25 years, all of the boats moored on any mooring in the harbor are required to have permits. So we're not talking about heading in new ground here. This rule has applied to the yacht club for 25 years with respect to having permits for vessels on moorings as well as outside of the North Anchorage. So to abandon 25 years of established procedure would be a significant departure from what we've done before with respect to that. So what I think we are looking at with the proposed rule is to expand the flexibility while still requiring that any vessel before it's put on any mooring has provided the harbor master with the documents that we're required to have to know that the vessel is properly registered and also is properly currently insured. And by having the harbor master validate before a boat is put on a mooring, by having them complete an application, we accomplish that. We've done it that way for 25 years, and so I think what the proposal that we're looking at would continue that tradition of not permitting a boat to be put on a mooring without first having the harbor master satisfied that those requirements have been met.
Well, I
hear
what you're saying.
Entrusting the yacht club to be able to provide that to the harbor master. It sort of puts the control in the hands of the harbor master before a boat can be put on a mooring, as opposed to relying on a third party to maintain those records.
And that's an argument. I don't, it's a valid argument that 2B, the way it's written, it says it's a violation of the Fairfield Code for any person to moor a vessel in the harbor management area without a current and valid permit. Now, actually, the code says it's a violation of the code for any vessel to be moored in the harbor management area. So I think it gives us the flexibility to, and the 25 years includes that working out that memorandum with the yacht club to solve the big problem in the harbor 25 years ago. So I was just suggesting that we should consider, which we can do, a simplification of the, as long as the yacht club provides the timely information, the harbor master has all the information of any boat that's moored there. And it would require, revising or adding a section to make clear that in this north anchorage, which we'd have to define, because of the state and federal permits, and because that's not open to all on equal terms in that north anchorage, that we would take a different approach or a simpler approach. And of course, it depends on the yacht club being responsive and providing the information about all the boats that are there
right,
as
so
they're put on.
Putting the record-keeping responsibility on the part of presumably the club manager, as opposed to the harbor master having responsibility for ensuring those documents are provided.
Provided to the harbor master, yes, and that would be a requirement of the rule. And then the rule could have. I think the town code has some penalties if the rules aren't complied with, but I just think that would be a simpler way to do it. That's just my opinion. It's not up to me, but I just think we should have a discussion about which approach is the simplest and in keeping with all of the policies. And I just bring it up for discussion, not to tell anybody how they should do it.
Well, I guess what does the harbor master think? Does he?
Whoops. My.
You're on it. Ed?
I'm sorry. My phone just had a glitch in it. The last thing I apologize to everyone.
This is not easy.
I'm sorry. Can I ask you to please repeat the question?
Well, I guess the question is, how do you feel about controlling the information, the data, if you will, about registration, insurance, etc., as opposed controlling it in the sense that it would have to be in online moorings first, and then you issue the permit, as opposed to giving the yacht club the 51 mooring decals and say, I expect you to let me know who's where and when they're there.
Yeah, I think that should be up for discussion as well. I'm not really in favor of, say, putting a mooring sticker on a mooring ball. It should be to the individual vessel,
right?
As has been done, in prior years. The administration of this, will be increased, obviously. The details of that, if this proposal is accepted, the details of which will have to be worked out. I'm not expecting a tremendous influx of vessels that this will apply to. Mm-hmm. Maybe 4 or 5 in the North Anchorage, and we would extend the same privileges to the South Anchorage holders as well. Mm-hmm. So administratively, I don't see it as being a big burden. Whether the manager at Pequot supplies information on vessels that he will expect to arrive and take advantage of this. I think we can. I think we can work together in that endeavor.
Jeff, I'm misunderstanding. Were you suggesting this only relates to vessels exceeding the 51, or was I misunderstanding?
No.
I thought you were talking about all 51 boats plus any other boats that Pequot Yacht Club wanted to put into the North Anchorage. All of them would be maintaining records to the club manager.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I was basing my recommendation for discussion on the state and federal permits, which are limited to 51 boats. But my understanding is the Corps of Engineers and the DEP, they don't care what the yacht club does with those 51 mooring locations. So if someone leaves and the yacht club puts someone on that on a mooring for a period of time, the Corps, the DEP don't care. I mean that can be formally confirmed with them, but that's my understanding. So with regard to the assignments of mooring locations, all of the assignments in the harbor would be made by the harbor master with assistance from the mooring committee. But then you might say, with the exception of mooring locations managed by the Pequot Yacht Club, in accordance with the state and federal permits and the terms and conditions in the town PYC Memorandum of Agreement. So that we'd write a separate section on the North Anchorage, define it, and then they would get 51 permits to do with as they wish.
So
and
what's the difference between what you just said and Ed's thing about assigning 51 permits to 51 mooring balls? I'm just not clear on what the distinction is.
Because you wouldn't have to you wouldn't get involved with temporary permits if someone who you'd be giving assigning the permits, or however we would write it, to the club in this instance, and the club can assign the mooring locations to whomever they want, and the club has the right to arrange the tackle in the anchorage the way they want to. It's not the harbor master's job to do that. Unless there's a problem with navigation or an issue. So the club does what it has. It can't put more than 51 more boats in there at one time, but it's up to them to decide if somebody leaves, they put another person in there, and then they immediately inform the harbor master through either they do it in online mooring, or they do it by with a paper transmittal.
Let me try to ask a question
the details of the boat.
So the question I guess I'm asking is, how many of the boats in the North Anchorage of the 51 moorings would have a permit for that vessel?
Well,
and that boat owner, how many?
That has to do with the details of writing this. We'd handle it differently, and the yacht club would be assigned 51 permits by the harbor master, not individuals. The yacht club would be, if this is the way we decided to write it.
Right. Uh-huh.
So the yacht club gets 51 permits to do with as they wish, and that's the approach that's done in Norwalk and Stamford and also Greenwich. Although Greenwich, I think I talked with my friend who's the chairman, and they're trying to set up, for the two main yacht clubs in Greenwich, that they would work, put in their information directly into like a subset of it's not online mooring, it's mooring info is the system. But essentially the yacht club would get the 51 permits. And the records of who was on those mooring balls or who's on the mooring locations would be just the same as it is for every other boat in the harbor. With the owner, the details of the boat, the insurance requirements, all of that would be kept up. But the yacht, I think we talked about this, Jack, at one of the meetings in the Pequot Library, where we talked about the possibility of just issuing the permits to the yacht club. The yacht club's responsibility is to provide the same level of detail on all the boats, but the permits go to the yacht club. You know who's on the boat, who's on the mooring, and who's the owner, and all the details of the boat. I'm just bringing it up because I know how it's done in Norwalk and Stamford, because I don't do it there, but I know how my friends, the people I know work on it. In Stamford, I don't even think they give the Stamford Yacht Club has 161 permits, I think, or 161 boats, and all of the details about what goes on in that anchorage, that's the Stamford Yacht Club, and in Norwalk there's 3 clubs. But I'm not saying that that's what we have to do here. That's not because somebody else does it. We have to do it here. It just seems that, and the other consideration, and I'll stop talking, I'm sorry, is the state and federal permits that are issued. So I don't think we want to be careful that we're not imposing a requirement or a restriction of some sort that's more than what the state and federal permits require.
Right, but if I hear you correctly, we're actually removing a requirement that we've had for the vessels that are in the North Anchorage to obtain a permit from the harbor master.
Yes,
and
that's
instead
right.
we'd be issuing those permits to the yacht club, and they can do whatever they want with whatever boats they want on there. That would be a departure from our long-standing rules.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I understand.
That's the suggestion for discussion.
I got it. I think.
All right.
Ed, is that what you were understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the commission then would have, or the harbor master would be relying on the yacht club to provide him with all of the information that our rules require, as opposed to requiring all of the boat owners to provide the information that's required under the scenario that Jeff is suggesting.
Yes, and then in the ordinance there's a section for penalties. Any violation shall result in a fine not to exceed. Well, I don't we want to get into that, but well, anyway, I don't want to get into the penalties now. But that would be one way of implementing this. You're relying on the yacht club to provide the updated information of every boat. Anytime there's a boat on a mooring there, the yacht club provides that information. And whether we could set up the online system to allow them to do it directly, anyway, I'm sorry to talk so much with.
Right, so I could see, so we would have every boat's applications being submitted into online mooring, and any boat that's added for any period of time to the North Anchorage, would all their applications would be being put in by Pequot Yacht Club into online mooring. And then Ed would be accepting that those are the boats that are currently in the North Anchorage part of the harbor, right, using online mooring system to do that. So it would be, administratively, it would be the club's obligation to timely be updating every record for every mooring vessels in the North Anchorage, subject to penalties.
Right. As anything changed, the expectation would be that would be reflected in the database.
If on a Wednesday a new boat is being put on a mooring, before that happens, it would be Pequot's obligation to have the copy of the insurance and copy of the registration, and for the club to be inserting that into the online mooring system and getting an approval from the harbor master. I think I get it.
And there would be no stickers on boats in the North Anchorage,
right, so
that the who is where would be totally would be only noted in online moorings. There would be no way to check that. In other words, if something happened in the harbor, there would be no there would be no, the harbor master wouldn't know who was supposed to be on one string as opposed to who was on another string in the North Anchorage. That would be totally at the discretion of the yacht club.
Well, and that's an issue that we would have to discuss to see how that should be. If there's a way to handle that properly.
And this would certainly be simpler for the boat owners, because it would just be the job of the yacht club to input all the information instead. So
right.
It would simplify things for them that way.
Mm-hmm.
Has the yacht club expressed its opinion on any of this?
Yeah, we should unmute and allow the public to make a comment if everybody's agreeable. Would you be willing for me to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that. Hang on just a moment. Okay, we should be able to hear from the public. Is there a member of the public who would like to identify themselves and give their address and then make a comment?
Yes, this is Devin Santa.
Hi, Devin.
I live on Overhill Road in Fairfield and representing Pequot Yacht Club. Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, we can. Good.
Thanks for the opportunity. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to speak here. And second of all, I think a lot of what I've heard so far is closely aligned with where Pequot would see this going. I think fundamentally we're in agreement on we need an organized and orderly harbor. The requirements of the harbor management plan are the same as the requirements of the club related to registration and insurance. So those are things that we maintain for our fleet anyway, boats that are not on the mooring strings themselves. So, yeah, I think we, as I've heard it, it seems that the primary sticking point is making sure that that information is properly obtained, categorized, uploaded to whatever format may be deemed suitable, and that's something the club would be ready, willing, and able to participate in and provide. From the club's perspective, what's important to us, again, organization of the harbor, compliance with the rules, but also the flexibility to manage the field accordingly and with some speed, with the ability to say, okay, someone's coming in 1 week, someone's going out 1 week, and we can make that change in near real time. So I'd say the one thing is how the system sounds good, just allowing us to make these changes rapidly would probably be the one thing we would ask.
Are you referring to the proposal that the chair put together, or are you referring to Mr. Stedman's alternative idea?
I suppose I'm referring to the proposal. I guess I'm letting both soak in, but my comment in the end there was related to what the chair put together that was necessitating action on the issuance of temporary permits.
Yeah.
So I'd be more inclined to something that would be, if the club can maintain the database, upload the data of all registrations and insurance certificates for boats that could occupy or would be occupying the North Anchorage, and then provided that information was uploaded, those boats as of right could access those moorings. And again, if the club didn't comply, didn't maintain that information, subject to appropriate repercussions and penalties.
So, Devin, so just so I understand, are you thinking that even though there are only 51 moorings, that the club would have a list of, say, 55 boats that wanted to be in the North Anchorage, and that the club would upload the data for the 55 boats, and then make a decision about which of the 55 gets in the harbor? I mean, I guess my question is, how would the harbor master know if you've got 55 boats, or would the harbor master know if you've got 55 boats but only 51 moorings, who was there and who was not coming in?
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking along those lines that, yeah, you could have 55 approved boats or 55 boats with registration and insurance, and that may be on the 51 moorings. We wouldn't have more than 51 boats because that's the limit of the moorings. As far as the harbor masters, keeping the harbor master in touch with who's on those moorings at any given time, the club would maintain that list and can provide it at will upon request, or it could upload it daily or weekly or every other day, whatever would be to the convenience of the harbor master. I just wouldn't want to create a bureaucratic burden to the harbor master to approve things on a rapid turnaround basis when the approval seems to be related to is the paperwork in order.
Yeah.
Right.
It's Jeff again, if you don't mind. Now, I wasn't thinking of, you would end up issuing 55, more than 51 permits to boats that you would then move in and out.
No.
That's a tricky one because you've got the state permit limits you to 51 locations. I was thinking you just get 50. The club would get the 51, and then you would provide information on the additional boats. Not that you'd permit more than 51 boats up front, and then you just move them in and out. That wasn't what I envisioned, but maybe.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think the process is a little easier to issue the 51 moorings to 51 permits to Pequot Yacht Club that may have various boats on there, provided they comply with the size restriction, the paperwork limitations, and like you said, Jeff, you necessarily want to model yourself after other towns, but it's consistent with what other towns do. And I think we're not trying to get away with anything here. We're just trying to say, can we come up with something that's less burdensome from a bureaucratic standpoint, that accommodates the club's needs, recognizes the state and federal permitting and the component of the MOA. And I think it would be something along the lines of allowing boats to use it, provided they have the information uploaded, but not having necessarily another step that would be approval of any given boat.
So, Devin, let me just see if I can play back what I'm hearing. So the advantage, I'm trying to think about this from the perspective of the harbor master. So the harbor master's, the advantage for him in this concept would be that there's really not going to be any administrative responsibility like the temporary mooring permits with this model. This would be issue 51 permits to Pequot Yacht Club, and Pequot Yacht Club would provide a list of vessels equal to or exceeding 51 that have, and here's the documentation and insurance proof for those 51, for those vessels, more than 51 potentially, and any of those combination of vessels could be occupying the 51 moorings, but the harbor master would need to concern himself with which vessels happened to be there at a particular time, but if he was interested, the club could advise him of that. So there would be no record keeping for any of the 51 moorings for the harbor master to be doing at that point, if I'm understanding correctly. So that would actually relieve the harbor master of record keeping for any vessels in the mooring field in the North Anchorage. Correct?
Yes, but as I see it, it would relieve the harbor master of that responsibility. It would put that responsibility onto the club. The club would need to comply. If the club did not comply, subject to penalty, because that would be the rules.
Right.
And I think we would effectively, again, as I understand the concerns, making sure the paperwork's in order and making sure the harbor's organized. I think we can, if those are the two overarching things, I think we can accommodate that with the system as outlined, not create a bureaucratic burden onto the harbor master, and meet the spirit of the documents that guide us.
So then the question is, where are those records? Are they in the online mooring system, or is just Pequot going to keep them and make them available to the harbor master? We can work out how that would work.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And if online mooring would have the flexibility to allow us to do that, or if it needed to be another means. But I'd imagine we can cross that bridge if the concept was agreeable.
Yeah, I think with the online mooring, it's one boat to one mooring. Otherwise, you can't. I mean, it's difficult enough for me to transfer one boat to an available mooring, let alone have two possibly be assigned to the same mooring. So, I think you're right, Devin. Administratively, it would be, a bit of an issue that we'd have to overcome. But
and I suppose one
solution.
possible solution.
That was the reason behind the idea of the temporary permit. It's like, okay, well, you have 51 occupants there already, and there will be a few more let's say extended transient vessels that want to come in for 3 or 4 weeks. So you would temporarily assign that person to a berth, whether it's in the North Anchorage. I mean, we're focusing our discussion on the North Anchorage right now, but I really wanted to open it up to South Anchorage as well. But
right.
I mean, we could further discuss that also.
Yeah, I'm not really under the hood of online moorings, but I understand it does have some inflexibilities, that it really is kind of set for one boat per mooring.
I take it you're smiling from ear to ear when you say that, right?
I've heard some challenges, but again, here could be a way to say, okay, we have the online mooring system. Maybe in the online mooring system it is Pequot Yacht Club moorings 1 through 51, and the assignments have to reside in a spreadsheet that could be sent to Ed either upon request or on a daily or weekly basis, that would provide the assignments of boats 1 through 51.
And the documents that the harbor master needs to be satisfied with for the vessels, how would we think about that?
We could either forward them as they come in, maintain them to be audited as required, or I suppose one or the other. Either a boat comes in, is on the mooring, we have to get that to Ed. And if a boat is on a mooring without that information in Ed's hands, then it's a violation. How we get that stuff to Ed, I don't think online mooring would provide us that ability to upload, unless we just had kind of dummy mooring numbers somewhere that we could just Pequot 100 to whatever, that as boats came in, that would be uploaded there.
Yeah, it's just not set up for what you're describing.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, we could just old-fashioned email it over.
And then there's the question of whether, if we went down this path, if Ed, you would be okay with just having Pequot be able to provide that to you upon request.
Right. I'd like to think about that a little bit, just to, any possible ramifications, which I don't right now. I don't see any, but I mean, having like I mentioned before, having a distinguishment between what becomes a transient vessel versus what becomes a vessel moored in one of the 51 spots. Then there's a few details. The fee structure as well. So.
Well, the fee structure can be simplified if the 51. If we go to put the mooring stickers to the moorings themselves, not the boats, the fee structure could be dramatically simplified if Pequot Yacht Club wrote the check for 51 times the fee.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And again, I believe this to be more consistent with club mooring fields than not. And I think online mooring is probably doing a good job for the public field in terms of the transparency and the wait list automation. but I think it seems to me to be a bit of a square peg in a round hole for what we have in North Anchorage.
Well, I mean, to the extent that the club is keeping the same boats on the 51 moorings for the season like we do in the town field, there's not really a difference. The difference is that we're trying to put 56 boats into 51 moorings by juggling them around. So that's just to be clear about what that's what the challenge is here. So, and I understand what the club is trying to do that. I'm just trying to figure out what's the right kind of rule to put in place so we actually have a rule that covers what the club has been trying to do.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Jack. It's how the mooring field is used, not.
Yeah. So we want to have a rule that recognizes that the harbor master is comfortable with, and I think, speaking for myself, that I'm just trying to make sure that there's a rule that accomplishes that specifies what's actually happening instead of a workaround.
Yeah.
Right. I guess it's whether the data can go into online more easily. As a mechanism, not as a rule.
Yeah, it just feels like, to the extent that we're not controlling what boats are in the North Anchorage at the town level, and that's up to the club to decide, the necessity of having the documents that the town requires in the South Anchorage also applying seems like a stretch at that point. It seems like it's either the club's responsibility to maintain everything, or it fits into the sort of the model that online mooring is designed for. It seems like trying to force the document storage into online mooring when the club is moving. We don't know which boats are going to be in the North Anchorage at any time. Just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. If we're not going to be issuing boat permits in the North Anchorage, it doesn't seem to make sense to use online mooring for record keeping. I don't know if Kim or Ed have a different view, but
I think you're
feels
right.
Like once you get over the not knowing which boats are on which moorings, it doesn't seem to make sense to be using online mooring for that section.
Right, and I agree, because the records in online mooring would be reflective of nothing for the North Anchorage.
Right, and
Except
then we're paying for using records in a system that's not really keeping records of anything.
Right. It would simply be for a subset of boats that may or may not be there. So.
Yeah. That thought did cross my mind too. Well, during the discussion, I was thinking, well, gee, it kind of negates the need for online mooring if we went down that road.
In the North Anchorage.
In the North Anchorage.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, and I have to go back and talk some more about it. That in Norwalk and Stamford, they don't put the information of the yacht clubs into the online system.
Right. I mean, I think that's what we would do is we just delete those and all of the whatever is required under our rules, if anything, going forward with respect to what's happening in that section of the harbor, would be the obligation of the harbor master to work with the club manager to follow through on. No records would be kept by the harbor master. It sounds like.
Well, the harbor master would have the records, but they would be assembled by the yacht club and provided to the harbor master.
Yeah, it sounds like on request because they're going to be moving boats in and out periodically through the year. So it doesn't make sense to
either on request or as occurred.
Right.
And another question, I don't know if Kim, someone brought it up, is identifying boats that, with the stickers. I don't know how that's done in the yacht club boats in Stamford and Norwalk have the mooring stickers, but that was another thought. I hadn't thought of that.
I don't know. Why would we need that?
I don't know.
I can't think of why. We don't know what boats are going to be there anyway. So unless we ask the club to tell us today which boats they've got there, there's no need for stickers.
There'll be no need for stickers on those boats. I mean, I guess it's a separate question about whether or not we'd want them on boats in the South Anchorage.
Right, but right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not any approval process for a harbor master at this point. This is just relying on the club to get documents.
Right.
For the 51 moorings. So there's no real need for stickers, I don't think.
Right.
And the rule would have the conditions that the club is responsible for complying with the conditions in the state and federal permits. Not creating an issue that issues having to do with navigation or environmental quality, and then specifying the type of information and when it would be provided. But those would be the conditions for issuance of 51 mooring permits to the club.
Right. And this is essentially what the club proposed in their letter a month ago to the commission.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it certainly does simplify things for the harbor master. It complicates things, I think, for the yacht club.
And it limits the centralized data record keeping that we aim to accomplish by getting everything onto online mooring. But we're holding the club completely responsible for timely maintenance of all the record keeping through whatever system they want to put in place.
Right. And notification of the harbor master that they have that information, and B, when that information changes.
Right. It sounds like the club would be holding the town harmless now for all the kinds of, we'd have to work with council on that, but yeah.
Right.
But again, this was brought up for discussion and as an alternative to the first proposal.
Right.
So.
This is Chris here. I was able to dial in late. I apologize. However, Jeff Engborg could comment on the complexities that he sees from the type of managing of these files.
Good morning. This is Jeff Engborg. I live at 12 Broad Axe Lane, and I am the general manager of the Pequot Yacht Club in Southport, Connecticut. Good morning, everybody. I heard a question asked and would like to respond to that. The club would have no problem emailing daily if that's necessary, whatever interval the harbor master would want on any boat and all boats that are in the North Anchorage in a dynamic fashion, because we have that information at our fingertips.
So how often, Jeff, this is Kim, how often do you think that would be? Do those changes happen weekly, monthly, biweekly?
It depends on the time of the season. Early in the season, a lot of changes happen because people say they're going to come, and they might even get a sticker or a permit from the harbor master, and then they don't come, so we make a substitution. So initially there'll be a big rush to get 51 names on 51 parking spots, which is standard and seasonally appropriate. And then there's a change in the beginning. There might be a fluctuation of 10 boats, excuse me, and then after that it'll stabilize, and there'll only be maybe one change a month. There's really not a lot of change. Most of it's static, because we only have 51 parking spots at a time.
Right.
So there might be 5 or 6 dynamic boats throughout the season. And we have that information. It's not a problem to share it with you guys. I've just lately and continue to have some issues with the online where my ID reverts back to only being able to see my anchor instead of the other ones. But I think they've been really good about responsive, and we've been talking back and forth with online mooring at least twice a week.
I'm thinking, Jeff, that this probably would not have anything to do with online mooring. This would just be a communication between you and the harbor master using something other than online mooring. One question is, how would you foresee the copies of registration and insurance declarations pages for these vessels being available to the harbor master. It's up to the harbor master about whether he actually needs a copy or just needs to know there is a copy he can see. But how are you thinking about it?
Oh, I have those. I'll have those, so I could just PDF. Whenever I communicate the change, I would PDF the necessary documents, attach it to an email, and that way everybody can find it at any time, and it's dated and has the information.
Yeah, okay.
Once we get through the big rush, there's really not a lot of change. It kind of settles and it'll slow down about mid-July. And then any other boats, most of the boats that come after that are just there for 2 or 3 days. So we would not have a problem sharing that information on a regular basis, or actually we could email every time there's a change. And since the change is only 1 to 5 boats, we can use the same spreadsheet just with a new column that will make it stand out and then attach the documents. Not a problem.
Ed, clearly if this is the direction we go, we'd want to have a conversation with the full commission at our upcoming meeting. But do you have immediate sort of reaction to this alternative approach, or you want to think about it, or have questions? I mean, this is really
I think it takes a little bit of digesting. It would be easier administratively. I continue to be concerned about transient boaters, or if you want to call them floaters, which that would be absorbed into the additional 5 or 6 boats that get juggled around. But certainly it is simpler in the bookkeeping department. So that's one of my main objectives, is just to try to keep things simple, but abiding by all rules.
We have to look at we're updating the harbor management plan. My suspicion is that this might require a change, but we're updating it anyway to the harbor management plan as well as to the rules. And should take a quick look at the town code, too, if we were going down this direction.
Right.
And again, the town code, I think we're all, what did I do with it now? The town, I think we're okay with the town code, because it calls for any vessels have to be. It is a violation of the Fairfield Code for any vessel to be moored in the harbor management area without a current and valid permit. And I think that what we're talking about is that the permit would be issued to the yacht club, and it would apply to the mooring of 51 vessels in the North Anchorage.
Right.
But I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
But what about though we didn't get to the discussion of the temporary permits in the rest of the harbor, though, which we would then.
I mean, it feels to me like that what we talked about here is not really about temporary permits. We're really talking about a different permitting process for the entire North Anchorage. And by addressing that, it gives the club the flexibility to put any boat they want on any mooring anytime, as long as they've got records. So we've sort of bypassed the temporary permit discussion in the North Anchorage by just considering dramatically changing the way we permit in the North Anchorage. So it does open the question about whether we should have temporary permits introduced into the outside the North Anchorage, but I think it's sort of that question is a moot question for the North Anchorage if we go down this path. Right?
That was the second part of Kim's discussion draft, was the first part I can't remember. The A and B.
Well, I don't.
Kim, did you have a thought on that?
I think that we're talking again about a small number boats, and I think that that would be, there are a lot of details that we would have to work out for that, because I think the idea of the state statute that says that all permits expire at the end of at year end, we would have to deal with. We would have to decide on fees. We'd just have to decide on how folks would get sign up for, indicate an interest in those moorings. But again, I don't think we've discussed it in a very general kind of way at our last commission meeting, but I don't think we have. I have no reason to think we have. We don't have wouldn't have agreement, but we don't have at this date have agreement from the commissioners that that's something to pursue. So.
My sense on this question about B in the proposed temporary mooring permit rule was really it was a fairness issue if we were going to establish such a thing for the North Anchorage, that it seemed unfair to not include something like that for outside the North Anchorage.
Right.
But it's not like there's been pent-up demand for such a thing in the South Anchorage that I'm aware of.
Right.
And it introduces a lot of complication and potential updating of rules that wouldn't be necessary. I'm thinking we're creating a problem that's not one we need to create here if we're thinking about going a different direction in our rules to address more than just a temporary permit question in the North Anchorage.
Right. I agree. I don't want to bite off more than we can chew, and I think at this point, because we haven't had any comment from anybody other than the Yacht Club about the changes providing temporary permits in the South Anchorage. So that might, in all fairness, be an idea that we need to publicize a little more before we begin fooling around with changing the rules.
Right. And I'm mindful it sort of gets to an item further down on our agenda that we need to try and get these rules in place for the coming boating season, including any system updates we need online mooring to make to accommodate any updates to rules.
Right.
So we'll talk about that in just a moment in terms of a timeline. But I guess my sense or recommendation would be to put off consideration of temporary permits outside the North Anchorage because of all the complication it presents, and we're creating a new rule that there's not really a demand for that we've heard about. And it was really driven by a fairness question.
I agree.
With respect to the North Anchorage.
That's my sentiment
if
too.
Folks agree. Okay.
Yeah, agree.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. Kim, I defer to you. It feels like it would be helpful to move things along as quickly as possible. If maybe, Jeff, you could help us with thinking about what the updated rule would look like and look at all of the other rules of our rules and procedures that we're trying to get approved pretty quickly here. If we were to move ahead with the idea that we've been talking about today, which would be to change the permitting structure for the North Anchorage, kind of carving that out for a different process than the rest of the harbor, and then what other rules are affected by introducing that rule, just to make it clear if there are other rules that carve out, make it clear that rule excludes this new rule that's being created with respect to the North Anchorage. I just want to see if we could maybe, in time for our next Harbor Management Commission meeting, have something to actually look at together. Yeah. Is that something you could help us with?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Tried.
Good.
So like a new rule and what changes to other rules. That from the version that we talked about at our last Harbor Management Commission meeting.
Yeah.
So then we can have a chance of moving this forward timely. So that sort of would be item 2 on the agenda. I guess, Kim, I'm proposing that we would look at what Jeff puts together at our upcoming Harbor Management Commission meeting.
We could do that, or we could even, our commission meeting is until the 17th,
Have a special meeting?
Depending on people's stomach for another meeting, we could theoretically take a look at have another meeting to take a look at whatever it is that Jeff is able to get put together. I'll go either way on that. The faster we can
move on this, the better chance we have of all the other hurdles we have to do to get the rule approved.
Right.
Jeff, what are your thoughts? I mean, this is sort of, I think having a special meeting dedicated to moving this ahead would be helpful.
I'm looking at, I'll do the best I can. This track changes function gives me a headache sometimes, but I tried to make, you asked if I could prepare, for example, a statement of purpose, which I did, and then I highlighted that in yellow highlighting, so maybe that's the way to do it. If I work on this statement of, I'll start on that. I've got to work on
I think, Jeff, it would be best if we could have something that looks like a rule to react to, and then any recommendations on other rules that might need a word added here or there, or a sentence that would make it clear that the North Anchorage is exempt from that rule.
That's easy. So I'm writing essentially a couple of new sections without going and making all the technical changes that may be affected in terms of orders of stuff. Just
exactly.
Okay,
so
that's
we
simple.
got something concrete to react to and explain to the other commissioners.
Well, nothing simple, but my simple mind that I can do that.
Okay. So we have, Kim, you were right. Our next meeting is not till the 17th.
Right.
And it's probably got other items on it already. So how is it possible, Jeff, that we could do a special meeting sooner than that?
Yes, I could do this afternoon, but we have our plan meeting tomorrow, and I've got to finalize this survey. Yes, I can do this in a couple of days. In fact, maybe I could even try to do it tonight if I can finish the Survey Monkey thing this afternoon. I'm talking out loud. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, we would have to take care of this next week.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
it would have
we can
to be
do that.
sometime next week that we would get together to do this.
I can have this by Friday, or I can have a proposal to look at with just by itself for this. I can do that for Friday of this week, just for you to look at.
Okay.
And Jack, you're thinking a special meeting of all the commissioners, or a special meeting, another meeting of this committee?
I think it should be all the commissioners at this point. We've got, I'm not sure if Sam and Harry were able to join us, but I feel like to move this ahead, we should try to have a special meeting to do it. I mean, I don't think it's more complicated to do a special meeting than to do this committee, right? Administratively.
Well, no, it really isn't. The only thing about a special meeting is we can't vote. So.
Right, but we could then make a go decision at the 17th meeting, having considered it at the special.
Yeah. We could do that.
Oh.
Then we'd have an opportunity for everybody to ask questions, weigh in, and be better able to pull a trigger. And it sounded to me like the only rule that was a concern was the Rule 20, and the other rule changes we talked about were good. If this new rule is okay and there are just some minor technical changes to other rules affected by this new rule being created, I think the only thing we'd have to do is go back and look at Rule 20 again as proposed and decide what we need to do to make a true transient rule work for everybody.
Right. Right.
And maybe we could even do that at the special meeting, too.
Get the sense of where people are. Yeah.
Yeah, because once we have this new rule for the North Anchorage, it might be a lot clearer about the transient rule. In fact, it might be worth spending a minute or two with our members of the public from Pequot Yacht Club to get their perspective on that.
Okay.
Taking into consideration if this new idea for the North Anchorage permits being assigned 51 permits, do what boats you want on it, what are thoughts about the transient rule? Devin, do you have a thought on that?
Chris, Devin?
This is Devin. And, first of all, thanks for the opportunity and considerations in the first part of this. As far as the transient, I think then we start to fall into what would probably be more conventionally considered transient boats, not so much the temporary boats in the North Anchorage. And there we start to be considering those 3 moorings out in front of the club.
Right, but those are not right. Yeah, those are just the transient rule, and so it was just that first part of the Rule 20 was related to those moorings, right?
Right.
Yeah, which works pretty well for those consideration of those. I don't know that we have a.
Yeah, we were talking about changing it to a limit of 14 calendar days per year, but I'm assuming that's not really a concern for the yacht club, right? Would that be a fair?
Not change the language as proposed. I mean, I think that the temporary boats in the North Anchorage were kind of fitting within the past plans as quote unquote transients.
Yeah, I mean, you can put any boats. If this thing, as we discussed earlier today, goes through, then there's no reason to even have a conversation about transients in the North Anchorage. It's really up to you to put whatever boats you want in there.
And the ones in front of the club, I think the language as currently written is appropriate.
Right, and
Chris,
that's actually. I'm sorry, Jeff. That's actually part of your conditions in your state permit for the North Anchorage is that the club will provide 3 transient moorings, preferably in the area. In this
so those are the
South Anchorage then, but offshore of Perry Green and in the vicinity of the club. So that's another condition that you have to comply with as part of the.
Finished accordingly.
We just changed the duration that people can be on those moorings.
Yeah.
Those 3 moorings in our proposal, and what I'm hearing from Devin is there's no objection from the club with respect to what's proposed. So if we took out 20B altogether, is no longer relevant. All we have is a Rule 20 that's got that section related to the 3 transient moorings and a little bit of changed language around how long people can be on those moorings in a year. And it sounds like there's no objection from at least the club on that. We could open it up if there are other members of the public who'd like to comment on that.
Well, no. This is Chris Smith, and I agree with Devin. If the definition of temporary mooring is no longer wound into the transient mooring definition, then I agree. It's just going back to how we normally would be expected to operate those 3 temporary transient moorings. And a change into the duration for a calendar year, 14 days, I think is acceptable from us.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
So, all right. So we sort of have a sense that we could share that if we have a special meeting with the rest of the commissioners.
Right.
That feedback from at least Pequot Yacht Club's perspective, and maybe we'll hear from other members of the public as well on that. But that sort of takes care of Rule 20, and Jeff will come to us with a proposed rule, something to be numbered later, and a sense of what other rules might need a word tweaking here or there. And we can do a special meeting and then have a sort of a vote on rules on the 18th. We're sort of migrating into the 3rd item on our agenda, the timeline to get this implemented. So I'm thinking if we could do a meeting sometime next week, that's a special meeting. If we're all on the same page at the meeting on the 17th, perhaps we can approve the updated rules, Kim, on the 17th?
I would love to do that. I mean, we've asked the commissioners for comments we asked at the last meeting, went through the changes, and we had no comments at all on any of the changes.
Right.
So I think all that was really left to do was to deal with the issue of transients and this new rule. So presumably, unless people begin to have ideas that they haven't expressed so far, we're good.
Right. I mean, right. So as a sort of a working timeline, so we would be thinking in terms of a November 17th approval by the commission. Jeff, help us out here. So the next step after that is to have a public hearing. Is that right?
Just give me a second. I'll read the town code about this.
Right.
Adopt rules and procedures. All right. Prior to adopting any such rules and procedures, the Commission shall conduct a public hearing. Notice of the time and place of the hearing which shall include the title and summary of the rules and procedures, shall be published in a local newspaper. Now, I think we've got permission to do that online now. At least 5 days, but not more than 15 days prior to the hearing.
Okay.
Then at the hearing, the Commission can act on it. After hearing public comments, the Commission can act at that hearing, or when the hearing is closed. The Commission shall act upon said rules and procedures, and may make such changes or alterations as appropriate or necessary, and that those changes shall not require further public notice. Then the changes become effective after publication once in a local newspaper. So one of the administrative issues of doing this previously was the need to have the newspaper publications.
Right.
Especially after the adoption, we were required, and we asked the town attorney at the time, could we do this online or do we have to do it in the newspaper? And he said to be safe, we have to put it in the newspaper. So it required a full page of the newspaper to include all of the rules and procedures. Which, right. but I'm assuming we don't have to do that now. That we can, that those requirements for public notices and hearings and adoptions are modified by the governor's executive order. But we can change.
And Jeff, this is Kim. I believe that in my conversation, I'm looking through my notes here.
Yeah.
I believe that the town attorney confirmed that we did not have to publish all of the changes in a newspaper, that we could simply put online, publish a notice and put all of the changes on our website, and that would suffice. And I'm still checking my notes, and I'm sure it's here somewhere.
Kim, did he indicate to you how we do a public hearing in the COVID environment?
No. Yeah.
No, he said,
that's an
here it
open
is.
question we have to talk to Mr. Baldwin about.
Yeah, we no longer have to publish in a newspaper. We can put the Executive Order 71 says we don't have to publish the whole thing in a newspaper, but we can put the rules and the notice on the town website.
So
but he did not.
Who's going to inquire from Mr. Baldwin about how we do a public hearing so we can build that into our plan?
Oh, I'm happy to call him, do that.
Okay. I did talk to him a week ago, and he indicated to me that we can, you'll recall that we are proposing to implement a administrative fee for people on the waiting list under our new rules that we discussed with the HMC. Mm-hmm. And he indicated to me that we can implement our new rules and procedures and make that new administrative charge subject, of course, to the RTM's approval. So we need to go before the L&A committee of the RTM and then go before the full RTM, perhaps even twice on 2 different dates. And then after that, it can become part of the town code as well. But it does not hold up our implementation of our rules and procedures, he said.
Okay.
So, Kim, you're going to check.
I'll check with Jim Baldwin on that. Yeah.
Baldwin, yes. Okay. All right. So I've noted a special meeting next week, a November 17th targeted approval of the rules and procedures, subject to the guidance from Mr. Baldwin, a public hearing to follow 5 to 15 days after the public notice, ideally online if he tells us that's what we can do, and then. We'll have to find out if we publish it again at the end as an online thing. That would be, I guess, the last thing that Jeff just talked to us about. And that should, if everything goes smoothly, get us to mid-December being able to have a new set of rules going into the new 2021 season.
Which is just a few weeks before you send out notices, correct, Ed?
Yes.
Right. But knowing what's coming, we can work with online mooring on a parallel basis so that changes with respect to the North Anchorage piece, we could get them cruising on, and any other changes that we have to implement, like fees for administrative fees, we could get them moving on that too.
Right.
Okay, so we sort of have a sketch of a timeline. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
All right, those are the things on today's agenda. Is there any other new business anyone would like to bring up? Okay.
No, just it was a very, very good discussion, I thought. But
yes, I think so too. Yeah. Thank you very much, folks from Pequot. That was helpful, and we are adjourned.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jack.
thank you. Bye.